now I'm just going to spend, as I mentioned, a few minutes introducing our HR planning content. Keep in mind, this is part of a wider ranging solution, a bit similar to what Eric just mentioned. For example, if you go in SAC, you'll get a great introduction to the SAC interface in just a few minutes, in about an hour actually, from Tim. But right now, if I go in my catalog section, this is where a lot of the content we've built that we help customers implement so they really can capitalize on the SAC planning potential. So all of these different components, based on a good FP&A strategy, they all feed into one another. So in the end, you actually have a planning solution that's in working order. In my case here, I'm gonna, what did I open? I did not open the one I wanted. Sorry about that. I wanted to open this one here where you are on HR planning, and this solution actually keeps on evolving. All these components keep on evolving as we build out solution at customers, as we learn what works best, how to improve your process. So all these lessons learned, we actually gain through all the different projects we're doing. We actually have one person whose sole task at SimpleFi is kind of gaining this additional insights, getting comments from people on projects. This works great. This actually could be improved this way. We did this at that customer. Maybe we should think and try to see how we could figure out something similar in our solution that would actually be even better for a customer when we install this content. So you must see this as your baseline. You start with this, you're actually able to use it. So we implement it and you're able to plan on it. But obviously you always have some specific requirements. Some things need to be improved. And this is really where SAC is so flexible, you can build up on it. So now I opened our HR planning solution. First step, have a clear view of the process. And this is really what we've worked hard at doing in our content. When you come in, yes, sometimes we do it once a month, once a quarter, or maybe even once a year. So if you're straight into spreadsheets, you may be having a challenge trying to understand where you're going with this. And this is where a process like this, quickly, you customize it for your requirements. You can put documentation in here so that when your users come in, they're really guided into their planning process. In our case here, so obviously we are loading data. So imagine you have your success factors data where you have all your employees with base salary and everything. You have your S4 system that has some of the financials you'll need for your HR planning process. So you load all of this, all the master data into SAC, and you can start planning. It could be something else than SAP solutions, but obviously I'm the one here, we're going with these solutions. And then you have your admin inputs. So all the basic information. So if you have tax rates, if you have some benefits, you know, healthcare is a flat rate per employee per month, and then different amounts, or even your merit percentage increases on the third month of the year. You know it's going to be, this year it's going to be 3%. So you set it up there. And so all these are really basic inputs by entities you can define, and these are then spread out automatically to all your employees, so you don't need to maintain everything employee by employee. Then the second step, I'll go into the screen in a sec. I'm just giving you quite a high-level overview right now. Then you have your cost center inputs by employee. Lots of times you try to do an employee plan, HR planning, where you go high level. When you go high level, it's, yes, okay, it sounds simpler because you have all your data aggregated, you don't need all the employee detail. But what's your baseline for an HR plan? It's your employees. You already have somewhere the employees that work for you, if they're full-time or part-time, what's their base salary, and then you can plan everything from there. So our planning solution actually starts you from that employee level, and then most of the calculations are actually done automatically by the tool afterwards, and you're able to have a very detailed plan that typically will bring you a lot more accuracy than if you were trying to go high level, because you're going to forget about some changes from an employee standpoint. Whereas here, since you're loading your employee base, it's always going to be current. Obviously, you may also have some new employees that come in, so you may need to add employees. You know that someone is coming next month. So yes, there is a process as well to include additional employees that will impact your plan going forward. Transfers between departments, and then reporting. I won't spend too much time on reporting today since Tim will actually be demoing the one we'll be building, but there's obviously great reporting potential as well within SAC that enables you to really analyze anything you input. So right now, I'm just going to go quickly into the admin inputs by entity, understand what kind of a maintenance you can do there, and then go into the cost center inputs by employee. Following that, I'll be handing over to Leela's presentation. So now if I click on admin inputs by entity, these are really the high level information you can enter, like taxes, as I mentioned before. Right now, this one is a bit more focused on US taxes. We are slowly building out some built-in flexibility by country, because obviously taxes in the US, taxes in Canada, taxes in Europe or Asia are totally different. And we actually are implementing it at multiple customers. So we figured, why shouldn't our basic solution already include this territory specific information? Here we're talking about merit percentage, as I mentioned before. Actually, in the new version that's coming out soon, merit is global, so for the whole company. But obviously, FICA, FUTA, SUTA informations, these are specific to the US. So you can enter that in your, and actually right now, this is filtered by default on Canada. So that's why we're not seeing anything in this one, as there aren't much in the US. So if I was to filter on East US, on that entity, so now we're seeing, whoops. So now we're seeing those FICA limit, percentage, and all these different information. So you set that up as a baseline, and when we go into the employee level plan, it will use it automatically. So if an employee is in the US, it will use these rules to build out all those costs that need to be covered within the enterprise anyways. And also, obviously, this is where also you can define some default spread based on your calendar. Is it by work day? Is it all days and everything? So you can really make sure data is spread out proportionally throughout the year, depending on how your employee structure is. This is from a global perspective. And then obviously there are also other indicators that can be specific to some companies. So here we're getting all the employees coming in, and we're able to see. So this is loaded directly. Let's imagine success factor. So have your base pay, you have your title, employee, which cost center they're in. You may have merit already defined in a source system. Are they here the whole year? So first month to last month, or actually do you know that that person is either moving to another department or moving elsewhere within the year, so you can change what the end month is. And after that, it's pretty much all there is. FTE is already here. It's 1 FTE because this employee is full-time. Then it's going to calculate someone who's part-time because it's also indicated in the system, and so forth. As you build it out, this is really the indicators I mentioned before, and you can then have tabs by country, and the base salary information you load from the system. Everything else we'll see in a minute is then generated by the tool. And obviously, you can then maintain it to optimize your plan, because you can optimize a good portion of it, but then you also need to adjust a few things. So I'm going my cost center inputs. So this is the planner. So the first screen was really the admin, making sure the load from the source system was good. We had all those basic indicators that were applied, FUTA, SUTA, that's maintained centrally. That doesn't really vary, but some others may vary a bit more. So you give them for people who manage your cost center budget. So some cases where 401k may vary over time, some other annual values that you want to manage by cost center. So if I manage these cost centers here, I'm able to go and have a look at them. Then I can go and make some adjustments in my cost centers. So again, you could have some security on this one, and I may need to make some adjustments. So this is a salary that's done. So in this case here, we actually see that the top one, which is East US, is locked. I can't. Everyone confirmed it was good, so it's been locked in the system. But I could still make adjustments on Canada because this is the rights I have on this one. I make any adjustments that I feel necessary. Bonus target, pretty much the same information the admin fed in, but the admin has a version, and then you can adjust it based on your requirements. I could go input a new employee. I will not be doing it here because we're almost out of time, and I know you want to listen to Leela in a minute. So you enter your new hires. This could actually be fed also from another platform that has your job postings. So we've actually done that interface multiple times where your job postings are in here. So you can see your job postings and feed them or not within your plan. So annual pay, start month, end month, bonus target. That's it. Everything else will be generated by the solution to really help you have something. Once that's done, you get to the last one. And here it's as simple as a press of a button, which would be the calculate comp button here, and everything else is calculated. So total compensation with salaries, with overtime by employee, but you have the total value. And then all the taxes and benefits with maximums. So if someone reaches a maximum somewhere during the year, it's going to apply it. If that person starts on the 4th month, well, maximum is going to take that into account to make sure all your accounts are properly populated. This one is simple enough. We're focused on the US, and we have some standard account, but then you customize it based on any kind of benefits you have within your company. Once you have all of this done, whoops, that wasn't the one I was going to. Once you have all of this done, you've planned everything, you've validated all your data. This is when you would go to the top one. Just a minute, I'm having a small issue here. Okay, and this is when you would click on push approved plan to cost center, for example, and this would then get you into your expense plan. So once you have your expense plan, well, obviously, you start planning your costs. You have your HR costs that are there, and typically we lock them out, and so that people can't modify them in the total expenses. They need to come back in the HR plan if they want to modify the compensation cost, but you can still see them within your plan and keep on planning it. If you want to get a better idea of how all of this integrates together, really on May 26th, our end-to-end enterprise planning presentation is going to be the one you want to be at, as it's a bit high level, but it really gives you the whole process. Okay, so I hope I've given you some good insights on this. We'll be shortly handing out this presentation to my colleague who, as I mentioned earlier, Leela's presentation has been recorded, so you will be listening to a recording, but the moment this is done, Leela is online and will be able to answer some of your questions. So I will now hand over this presentation to my colleague who will be able to start it. Just
all right. Yeah. Hello, my name is Leela. Today I'm going to review our Fiserv journey with workforce planning. We have taken on this journey with our partner SimpleFi Solutions over the last 1 year, and we have been able to standardize and leverage some of the features, functionality using the SAP Analytics Cloud. Today I'm going to give you a brief overview of our journey and also a few things, takeaways from our lessons learned and such. Before we go into the project, I would like to share a few thoughts about my company, Fiserv. Fiserv is a global leader in financial services technology, and we provide digital transformation capabilities to financial institutions. We also are a major player globally in merchant acquiring and payment transactions. And here are a few stats that stand testimony to our global presence. The stats that I am in particular proud about is about 12,000 transactions processed per second, 1.4 billion accounts on file, active accounts on file, and we service about 6 million merchants. These are point of sale terminals or merchant related acquiring services. So our presence in the US touches almost all the US households in one form or another. We service many of the financial institutions, about 10,000 of them, a lot of them actually in the US and North America. Coming to our workforce presence, we have 44,000 employees and about 9,000 contractors, spanning 47 different countries. So with this scale and expansiveness, we had our legacy process for workforce planning, which has not been very helpful in terms of managing a global organization. So let's quickly introduce our project. So what we have taken on is to cure some of these limitations or constraints we experience with our legacy process. Mainly, the legacy process has been very much spreadsheet-based planning offline, so it doesn't lend itself to uniform application of data diligence, or even the ability to drill down and see how much data diligence was applied by any given business unit or a financial analyst. So we also experienced misalignments between business units and the central functions. So these are the areas where the central corporate functions or technology functions were not able to agree on the numbers in a way that the business units and the central functions were able to produce plans, workforce related plans and forecasts that can reconcile to each other. We also had situations where the global assumptions around merit, bonus, and all these things were not really uniformly adopted by all the business units, and there is not even a way to decipher all of that. So the one thing really going in favor of our legacy process was like it was very flexible, spreadsheet based. So the analysts had all the sway they needed to impact the numbers, and they can easily work through their plans. At the same time, it was very opaque. It did not lend itself to any kind of drill down or traceability. So with those being our background, we embarked on this project to mainly create a data-driven planning model. So what data? So for us, Workday is our human resources system. So how do we harness that data? We also use BPC as our management reporting solution, SAP ERP as our ERP system. So the data coming from Workday, from a HR master data standpoint, and data coming from SAP ERP and BPC from financials data standpoint, how do we blend that together in a way that we provide a data-driven planning model? As we go through this, how can we implement standardization of the underlying assumptions, the drivers that can be applied globally, or even at a business unit level, applying the drivers in a way that they're consistent, they are traceable, and they are applied in a flexible way that the impact of those drivers can be observed on the data itself, the plan data. So the other key area where we wanted to get the systematic alignment between business units and the shared functions. So this has been an area, like already mentioned, has been a limitation. And finally, to be able to decrease the cycle time for putting a plan together, a forecast version together. And with all of this, the overarching objective being increased reporting capability, increased drill down reporting, and also self-service reporting capability. So with those being our program objectives, so we went on to define the scope for our project. So the workforce planning, compensation planning, we called it at some point. Then we expanded the term to be workforce planning because we wanted to include contractors' expenses and also other personnel related expenses into the scope, and also the various workforce related metrics. So with that, the scope has turned out to be including the compensation, which is employee related. Then we also have contractor expenses, or headcount metrics. And then we also included some HR transaction data in our scope. So these are things like open requisitions, things that are in the pipeline, from a open position being created and it is under the interview process, or candidates are being screened and those requisitions are coming towards a fruition into our a position being filled, and the timelines and other metadata associated with the open position, who is the supervisor, which location, what pay grade, and all of that information. We also try to incorporate that data related to any attrition numbers, terms, and also how can we give finance the ability to plan over the top additional new hires, such that the plans for increasing the headcount in any respective area of the company, how can finance add or top up that plan, even though those are not yet started from an HR standpoint in the workday environment. So these are kind of the key scope items we had for our project. Let's go look at the process overview at a high level. So the workforce planning process, these are the big rocks of the planning process. So it starts with preparing the model itself. So in order to prepare the model, we need to bring all that metadata, like I mentioned earlier, from Workday, from BPC, and then there are also a few inputs that are gathered from other systems, or sometimes these are inputs that are provided by the process administrator directly. So all of this gets us to the plan model being ready from a baseline plan standpoint. Once we have the model prepared, then of course we get into the planning functions themselves. So the planning functions include planning either at a worker level, which is a very detailed worker by worker level planning, which is the essence of this model, by the way. So when we talk about workforce planning, what is it in here that we don't get in a summary level management reporting model is the key to all of planning here is the worker. That term worker, including employees and contractors. How can we plan at a named resource level such that it can be rolled up into the different aggregations, be it cost center, location, job grade, job profile, supervisory organization, business unit, you name it. So that employee level planning becomes the core of this model's planning capability. Next, we have some areas of the company where it doesn't really lend itself to a worker level planning. We provided a exception process for a cost center level planning. These are areas where shop floor environment or call center environments where there is a high attrition rate or labor turnover rate, in which case it doesn't really make sense to plan the numbers, annual numbers at a named resource level. So in these areas, we allow those finance functions to plan at a cost center level. Then there is an approval function workflow. We'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in the next couple of slides. Excuse me. So in this approval function, the crux of this approval is the plan proposal is made by the business unit for all of those centrally managed functions, and the function owner finance team has the final say in accepting those numbers. If they cannot agree, they have to go back to the drawing board and work through whatever are the changes needed. So whatever remains in the system as the final plan is the one that has been reconciled and approved by the function finance, the owner team. So a little bit of background in terms of what this terminology is, the business unit versus owner. So think of it as a technology function. Fiserv has a lot of data centers. Those are infrastructure cost centers, we call. And in one data center, there can be different products, services, servers hosting many different functions for different business units. So it is a shared service that many business units benefit from the same underlying technology service function. The way historically we have managed the company, the responsibility for planning has been with the business units or with the technology functions or a mix thereof, and it has not been uniform across the company. So what happened is the responsibility for the final plan has always been somewhat squishy, and also gave rise to a lot of reconciliation issues in the plan. With the capabilities the tool is able to offer us, we are going towards standardizing the planning responsibility for all the shared functions such that the function owner has the final responsibility for the numbers. The business units can propose their plan numbers, but they have to be accepted and finalized by the function owner. So this is the approval workflow that we implemented within the tool. The next key area within the tool's capability in the process is reporting. So at a simple, just as an assistance for planning, aggregation of the plan numbers, dollarizing the plan, and turning it into financial roll-up is the plan output that an analyst is going to review as they iterate through the plan process. As the plans are put together and the business unit leadership or those finance central functions leadership looks at the plan, they also have the ability to use the trend reports to see how the plan is comparing with the prior year forecasts, annual plans, as well as the actual expense trends for the last many months. Then another key reporting capability is to summarize the plan and translate it in terms of the P&L reports that are finally going to be part of the management overall plan version. The last area within this process would be the export of this detailed plan. So in the workforce planning model, the plan is at the worker level, and the summary of that is pushed into the BPC management reporting environment, such that any of those accounts which are coming from the SCAC workforce planning model are locked for direct planning within BPC. They are not open for planning in the BPC financial model. It has to come from the driver-based detailed planning that happens in this SAC model. So with that, it completes the planning process cycle using this workforce planning model. So let's go to the preparation of the model in a little bit more detail. So in order to prepare the model, the plan administrator, this is again a business role, which is typically managed within the FP&A function. In our case, it's housed within our enterprise FP&A team. The process administrator brings in cost center metadata, entity metadata, and other fields like location, job profile. These are all the information that comes from the underlying master data table. So worker, location, pay grade, these are master data that comes from Workday. Cost centers and entity is the master data that comes from BPC. So in addition, the plan administrator also brings in the actual compensation data, and this is as of the agreed date that is used as the baseline for any given planning cycle. We bring in the base compensation as well as the bonus entitlement, target bonus information at a named employee level. We also bring in the headcount, which is basically the statistical representation of the named employee counts themselves. We also have the full-time equivalent of that number. This is for the part-time workers with the hours factored for the full-time equivalency. We also bring in open requisitions, as I mentioned earlier. This is again coming from Workday data. And once the data is brought in, as the compensation data is brought in, it's only applied to the worker dimension, but the data actions or calculations within the model will allow us to apply those numbers to all of the other dimensions like pay grade, location, job profile, cost center, entity, and all such. So in that way, the dimension data, the intersections become fully qualified, and the data is also applied to all of the future months in terms of the base comp spreading to the months in the forecast horizon, the financial periods in the forecast horizon. Another key input from the planning administrator standpoint are those global driver inputs. This is again one of the key objectives of the project. How do we standardize and make these global drivers central as well as controlled in a way that the corporate or the executive leadership has the ability to apply any changes. So these drivers include our assumptions for merit, the 401k benefits for US, medical benefits, and then the bonus pool assumptions. These drivers, for the most part, are applied globally, but then drivers like bonus can be applied down all the way to a business unit or a cost center level, depending on the pool of money that is being apportioned for each business unit, depending on their prior year performance and such. Again, there are some technical drivers that are applied. Number of days in a period is something that's needed for more from the data actions standpoint. There are inflation drivers. This is mainly due to the presence in our Latin American countries, some of the hyperinflationary economies. Again, these functions, we deliberately chose to apply all these drivers globally such that the business units, if there are 3 different business units who are operating in Argentina, we don't let them pick their own inflation drivers. All of this can be applied through a central planning administrator. And finally, FX rates is again another area where we try to keep it consistent with the forecast rates that are used within the BPC planning model. Those are the same rates that are applied to the SAC workforce planning model. Things like tax rates, and both for US as well as for international regions, these are also gathered with inputs from all those teams, those international teams, but they're all applied in the system centrally to the process administrator. So what this helps us do is keep a tight control on these global assumptions and also provide the ability to track changes. The global assumptions around capitalization rates. A quick word on this. Fiserv is a technology company. We capitalize a lot of internal labor time because we develop software. So as these development cost centers, there is a capitalization credit on the P&L, and by applying standard capitalization rates, we are able to take the impact of the total compensation with the capitalization credit for those cost centers, such that the P&L planning coming from this workforce planning model can be aggregated into the financial planning model with the impact on the operating expense by removing the CapEx component of it. So with all of this data prepared, the planning administrator is able to run the packages, apply these global assumptions or drivers, use the actual data, and then the baseline plan version is created. So this is the point when the plan administrator can go and say, now this planning version is open for business, and those users responsible for those different planning intersections are now allowed to go in with their and execute their planning functions. So let's dive into the proposal and approval process we talked about earlier a little bit. So in this handoff, the business unit is allowed to propose the numbers. So they can, going back to our earlier example, I am a business unit financial analyst, and I am planning for the resources who are going to support from a technology infrastructure or some of the corporate functions like finance, HR, brand, marketing, legal, any of those functions. And with the proposal being made within a dedicated proposal version, the business unit has ability to request for their numbers at the intersection of their BU, which is an entity hierarchy node, and owner, which is a cost center roll-up. So with that intersection defined as their right axis, the business unit is able to propose their numbers. Once these numbers are proposed, they are reviewed by the function owner. So this is the corporate or the technology function finance teams who are able to then adopt those numbers, and they bring it into the final version where they can make changes and reduce those numbers or reallocate those dollars as appropriate. Now, in this process, the next step is for the business unit to review what has been finally accepted by the respective corporate technology function. And if they are not in agreement, they both go back to the review and reconcile. And once the business unit gets to a point they agree with the final numbers, then they approve that in the system. And that's when the plan is considered complete. So we defined it in a way that the business unit has the ability to request and also finally review and approve, whereas the plan function owner has the final say in what is the total plan for any expense, because they are the ones responsible from a executive management committee standpoint. The owner of each of those functions is responsible to maintain the overall plans from an expense standpoint under their functions. So let's go to the planning functions. Let's look at the planning actual activities that are being performed. in a planning functions and those calculations. So at a worker level planning, so the plan administrator has already put together a baseline plan version. So that plan version has the data such that if I don't do any new hires, nobody is exiting the company, nobody is terminated, that is what you get for the rest of the year. But that's never the case in reality. So the financial analyst goes in and then they plan the financial aspects of those open requisitions. So when are those positions likely to be filled? What is the likely compensation for those open positions? That's one critical area, key input. They're also able to add net new hires, which is things that are not reflected within the open requisitions, but are further out into the future. The finance teams have the ability to add those as net new hires into the future periods. Finance teams can also apply known changes to the existing worker base in terms of reduction of force or redeployment of resources within different parts of the organization, or expected changes in any of those base comp and associated numbers. Financial analysts also are able to plan for the contingent workers within their scope, but the planning dollar terms for contingent workers is somewhat lean because there is no base comp, bonus, overtime, and all of these different factors. It would typically be a annualized expense or a hourly rate and hours of engagement for each of those contractors. In areas of the company where there are non-exempt employees, there is the ability to plan for overtime. Finance can also make topside wage adjustments, which is like not pushing down the compensation adjustment down to the each individual worker location or a supervisory organization level, but keep it at a cost center level. For instance, I know for sure in this area there will be an additional compensation because of market conditions or because of some additional inputs that are received from HR. So those kind of topside adjustments can be applied to the financial plan. Another key input, which is again at a financial analyst level and not at a global driver level, is attrition assumptions. And these are typically different for each cost center, different per region, and potentially different even at a different pay grade grouping level. So the financial analysts have the ability to apply their attrition assumptions over and above specific changes that they have made. If they know there are some resources who are going to be leaving the organization or antedated as of a certain date. In addition, any of the unknown attrition or flux can be applied as a factor at the cost center level. So with all of these inputs, the financial analyst is able to apply the data actions and dollarize the plan, review the totals, and they can continue iterating through this process until they are comfortable with the totals they are aggregating to. The beauty of all of this is once an input is made into the model, you don't have to start from scratch. You can continue to apply incremental changes. And this allows not only the analyst, but also anyone who is filling in for them to look at the base numbers and easily work with the data. or for their supervisor to review what are those assumptions and potentially apply any recommended changes. Going to the cost center level planning, which I mentioned is an exception which is applied only to certain parts of the company. All of the detail is very much same, with only difference being it's not at a worker level. We have the other dimensions like the grade level or the location and other metrics, which are typically not in a financial planning model. So these are the metrics what we get in addition within this workforce planning model that we don't get if we just do the cost center and account level planning within our management reporting model. So the planning is applied at a cost center level with these location, pay grade, and other details. Again, those are applied, aggregated, and those numbers can be reviewed by the analyst. So let's look at a few examples of the SAC screenshots here. So what I have here is a summary reporting, which is talking about how those financial impact of these different various worker level or cost center level plan details aggregate from an account structure standpoint. So you can see here total compensation and benefits, taxes, and other expenses are broken out. We have an account here called M&I personnel. So some of the workers or the employees and the contractors both have been designated as merger and integration related. So these are considered not part of our operating expense base for the business units and are reported in a separate area within the management roll-up. In order to feed this detail at such a level, the workforce planning model has also been enhanced with the capability to carve out the M&I related worker comp and as well as contractor expenses. Earlier we talked about cap rates. The financial reflection of that is the gross capitalization. So that would become the total financial impact. Let's look at the actual versus forecast, a detailed report. In this report, we are looking at different cost centers on the row axis here and actual versus forecast comparison. We have the ability to drill down all the way to a worker level in the detailed review. But one quick point about who can see the worker level detail: only the financial analyst who has the planning rights down to the worker level can see the data down to the worker level. Everyone else has the ability only to drill down up to the cost center level. So this has all been accomplished using the standard SAP security model within the SAC environment. Let's go to the next slide. This has the dashboard. So this dashboard covers the full-time equivalent by month charts or total expenses by month chart. So these are one glance visualizations, which are all made possible with the features of analytics, SAP Analytics Cloud. We also have these charts by creating bar charts with the different pay grades or the different currencies also you can use to create these charts. So these are some of the screenshots captured from our SAC environment. So let's go to the expense detail. This is the same one we looked at a couple of slides ago, just in a textual format. I'll not go through this to avoid the repetition. Let's go to the headcount output these are the metrics which are related to the headcount itself. So here is a term end of period view, EOP. One of the constraints we faced with our legacy process was different business units were reporting numbers either at the middle of the month or according to the bi-weekly pay cycles or end of the period, and it has been very difficult to reconcile the different business unit numbers to add up to what becomes the enterprise totals. Now with this model, we are able to go with a key decision that we will use only the end of the period view. This also allows us to compare the totals, the headcount totals, with the financial impact as the fiscal period total dollars can be compared to the headcount itself. So we broke down our worker counts into reportable and non-reportables, and within the reportable employees or the contractors, we define the employees into full-time and part-time. And from a reportable contractors, also we have them into different contractors, so contingent worker types. So we have all of this data within the model because we are integrating this all metadata coming from Workday. So let's go to the summary versus detailed. So in this one, we have the worker type, compensation grade, location, and we can drill down to the worker level itself. One key area within this summary reporting, which is another pain point in our current process, is the supervisory versus financial roll-up. When HR puts the numbers together, they go with the supervisory organization, and finance rolls up the numbers. We use the cost center hierarchy or the associated profit center hierarchy to get to the business unit. So there have always been differences as the supervisory versus the financial structure. There will always be timing differences. There will always be slight dotted line reporting differences all over. And this is the reality of many companies that we have interviewed as we gathered data for this process. And what our learned consultants, John and others, have advised us. So as we get to the solutioning for this, the best way is to be able to roll up the numbers, both from the supervisory org standpoint as well as the financial org, and then use the reporting features available in SCSV so we can create a walk between each of those views. So this walk can be drilled down all the way down to the named employees or contractors who appear in one view versus the other. So this makes it very easy to do the recon and be able to answer why those numbers don't agree, and they don't agree for a reason and what those reasons are. So let me go to the different data feeds. We touched upon the feeds from Workday and BPC early in the presentation. So let's deep dive on that a little bit. So here on the left side, I have Workday data, and from Workday, I have the master data coming from Workday. This is workers, contractors, their cost center, their company designation, their address information, location information, supervisory information, all of that. Then we have the open positions data. So open positions as of a given date. And we also have the midpoint salary information. This is the data that is applied to the open position. So finance can dollarize a given open position into its equivalent likely financial impact. Then finally, we have the actual comp detail itself, the pay information for all of the active employees as of the date we are integrating the data, their base compensation, bonus target bonus and such. So all of this information comes from Workday. And on the other hand, to the right of this, we are bringing in the master data for the financial org elements, cost centers and entity. We also bring in the FX rates from BPC, and the arrow pointing the other way, the interface going from SAC into BPC is the summary of the total financial impact of those, the detailed compensation plans or the worker financial impact, the workforce financial impact, how we aggregate it up to a cost center level, and then we push it into BPC. Apart from these two systematic integrations, we have the flat file loads. So most of those, as you can relate to the drivers we talked about, global drivers. So those are those tax rates, merit, 401k, bonus, the pension applied in some international regions. So all of these are coming from a plan input file load process from the plan admin. On the top right here, we also listed some of the data conversion we did as a one-time exercise, like bringing in the historical trend data, as well as bringing in the AOP, so it can stand available for any comparative reporting. So here is a financial systems landscape. Zooming out of that interface diagram, what we have there. In this, I tried to put this in perspective where SAC, BPC are on to the right of the screen, and the rest of the financial systems, S4, ERP being the main one, which is getting its data input from many different sources off to the left of the screen. And here we have Workday data feeding into SAC, coming to our BW staging environment, and we are using BW as the transformation layer in which we are able to combine the cost center and business unit, entity, other master data in a way that it can be easily consumed by SAC. So one of the areas where we learned in this process is SAC is not as flexible from a data integration standpoint as BW was. So we had to use some of the heavy lift capabilities of BW to make the data available such that SAC can easily consume it. So let me go to a quick recap of our lessons learned from our project. So one of the key changes we tried to implement here is the plan ownership change from the business units playing a supportive role to those shared functions, whereas the central functions are managed by those respective finance teams. So this change management, I would say, has been the most involved and challenging from an organizational change perspective, but having a systematic capability that allows us for a workflow makes the case for change easier to push for. One of the areas where we learned quite a bit is how to apply the security at an intersection that has the combination of our entity or business unit structure and also our owner, which is a cost center owner hierarchy. And in order to do the matrix plan ownership we discussed earlier, we had to define many different teams, up to 40 different teams with various data intersections under each of them. And what we learned is that the SAC security framework is much more robust than BPC management, the BPC financial models can offer. One thing we also have to deal with along the way with this project is handling the employee-related data, because it is sensitive, personal, identifiable information, and we had to get many approvals from within our cyber security as well as the Works Council approvals in Europe and multiple other international oversight approvals. But in order for us to prove the security and the underlying encryption and the powerful SAP built-in security features, we were able to harness all the documentation that SAP has provided us. So this has been easier to overcome. So the other area where we kind of had a challenge along the way is within each business unit, there are many analysts who are doing workforce-related expense planning. So with this process, we are able to embark on a journey where we started centralizing or creating a specialization within each business unit, such that over a period of time, we are able to consolidate the planning responsibilities into fewer hands than what we are at this point. And we aspire to consolidate them by a factor of 5x as we go along the next couple of planning cycles. The last lesson learned I would like to share is about executing this entire project remotely. All of our business sponsors, our key users, the core team, our consulting team, and the Fiserv financial systems team, everybody working remotely. It has always, these projects are never easy. Working remotely makes it even harder. So one or a couple of things we learned is to be able to schedule shorter meetings and have pointed agenda, and then also work with those key opinion leaders such that you gain a sense of where the solution needs to go ahead of time, because there is not a lot of room for online deliberation in these remote workshops. So we learned along the way, and we tried to adjust our meeting cadence and also tried to change the participants, and finally were able to get to a good feedback from all of our core team as we went through our user acceptance testing cycle. Let's talk about the key benefits that Fiserv is able to realize from this model. So the most important thing is standardization. That is encompassing standardizing the assumptions, standardizing the process, standardizing the security model, standardizing timing and level of data diligence, all of those things go into that. There is a governance and there is workflow around this process of the plan ownership. We are also able to apply the financial org structure elements in connection with the workday data elements. So all of that, the metadata is systematically driven and it is always kept up with the source systems feeding that data. So this creates a solid master data governance as well as a process governance model. So the drivers and scenarios that are applied in the model are shared, are common, they're global, and this gives us a very high degree of confidence that the comparative numbers between two different business units or two different business functions can give you a very good comparison in terms of how different units are performing against the benchmarks. This also helped us to create that reporting alignment I was talking about, the supervisory versus financial roll-ups, and how we can both speak our different languages but have a common translation layer in between. We also are able to combine much of the executive reporting, which is between the first data, historically how first data has operated, and Fiserv since we acquired them in 2019 July. So bringing together that kind of executive reporting in a fashion that it can be translated into the old view for both sides of the leadership is made possible with this detailed planning model. So finally, I would like to share some of the future plans we have. So here we are still working on international rollout of this workforce planning model. So gathering data around taxes and then those nuances, which are particularly different for international regions. We're working through that right now. Another big area is we are applying a few enhancements. We are going through implementing the changes which are pertinent only for a forecast process as against a AOP process. We are going through a large ERP integration or implementation right now for migrating from our ECC SAP environment to the S4, and also bringing the first data Oracle environments ledgers into the S4 SAP ERP. So as we work through this, all of the financial master data is going to be rationalized, and we are going to have a few changes to our P&L structures as well as to the entity cost center hierarchies and such. So we are going to work through this integration, and the systematic integration that has been built. We are going to leverage all of that as we go through the ERP implementation and keeping the SAC workforce planning model intact and benefit from the systematic integration along the way. So with that, I would like to open it up for any questions, and we'll be glad to share additional insights. Thank you.
Thank you, live Leela. You can actually unmute yourself as well right now. So thank you. I think we can all thank Leela for this great overview of the project at Fiserv. Do not hesitate if you have questions. In the GoToWebinar window, there is a question section. You can ask your questions there. I'll read them out loud so that Leela can answer.
Thanks, Eric.
Pleasure. So right now, there's only one question I'll ask out loud, and then don't hesitate to type in your questions as we're answering this one. I'll take the first part of the answer, Leela, and I'll let you complete, okay? So the question is really around how long does it take to implement a project like that in this case, HR planning. So what I'm going to say on this, actually, it really depends. You saw our SimpleFi solution, which is the baseline at the beginning. So when you start that project, it's really a question, is it going to be a low config project, medium config, high config, or even built to spec? So at Fiserv, when we started, it was a low config to really get to familiarize themselves with the solution and what it can do. And we quickly switched over to something that's much closer to build to specifications. So I'll actually let Leela complete that answer now.
Yeah, sure, Eric. I think we realized by working with our business partners and the core team, we quickly realized like there are many complexities, and we were able to go back to our leadership and request the additional resources needed to build to those specifications. So so in that case, I would say our core of the journey took us about 6 months, and there are a lot of aspects of change management, organizational readiness, which will take whatever time. Each organization is different. So from the core of the solution for this one, I would put that timeline in about 6 months.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So it seems there are no other questions being typed in. So do you have a closing comment, Leela, or I'll actually pass over to Tim for his part of the presentation.
I want to thank Eric, your great leadership, and John for doing the initial design and helping us with this implementation. So great teamwork.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. So thank you, Leela. Tim, I will now pass the presenter rights to you if you want to take over this presentation.